Welcome to today's episode of Small But Mighty. Security might be a big subject, but that doesn't mean people can't learn a lot in a short amount of time. We know people are busy, but they are still hungry for ways to approach securing their organization or clients. Twice each month, we'll be hosting 15-minute coffee chats with innovators and thought leaders in the cybersecurity space to provide big insights in a bite-sized format. I'm Stacy, and this is Joe from the Attila security team. And today we are here with Nease, Chief Technologist for IoT at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Hi, Lynn. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been working on lately.
Sure. So I'm part of our Point Next services business. So I'm spending a great deal of my time doing, I'll call it strategic consulting with customers on enabling Internet of Things, which is a multi-dimensional discussion. And typically it's around industrial processes.
That sounds fascinating. And because we are having a coffee chat today, we always like to go around and tell everybody a little bit about what we're drinking. So what is on your menu today? What's in your cup, mug?
I'm a cheap coffee drunk, so I'm actually drinking some of that Francisco's canned stuff that I am making by the pot loads at home. I mean, my coffee consumption, unfortunately, has risen a great deal in the COVID world.
Right, when you have access to Mr. Coffee right behind you.
That's right.
There we go.
Joe, what about you?
I'll go next. So basically, I feel like really hoity-toity today because I'm having Starbucks Verona, which is to me serious upgrade from my standard, Colombian medium-bodied blend. So feeling a little bit, special today.
I feel like today is a backwards day because if you're a regular watcher, Joe and I are the cheap coffee drinkers. I'm usually the Folgers guy. I did get gifted this fabulous, delicious local roast from a friend of mine over in Florida. So I'm drinking fancy coffee today, and our guest is drinking cheap coffee. Usually it's the other way around. So
right.
It's kind of like a fun mix-up, Freaky Friday. Well, with that, Joe, I'll turn it over to you, and let's get down to security.
Sounds good. Well, I'm actually really excited about today's topic, Lynn. We're going to be discussing remote access to an industrial control environments or industrial IoT environments. And obviously with what's going on with COVID, the state of the world right now, this is a very relative topic. So obviously it's been traditionally a very an environment where operators are on-prem running systems. Why is it so important now to really be thinking about remote access to these systems?
We've got several customers who I'm having to deal with as we speak right now, and this is a topic of great urgency, who are on the verge of having to close down production facilities. So there have been several in the food processing business, for example, who have shut down because they had a dozen workers test positive for COVID, and at this point they can't figure out how to change their processes in a dramatic way to enable things like social distancing and contact tracing. You can imagine, right? It's a physics problem, and so the real priority now for a lot of our customers is to keep their production operations running.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's super important. One day down, one machine down, let alone one day being down, is just lots and lots of potential revenue lost. I guess in terms of you have a term I know that you've used in the past with me when you and I have talked about the potential for a shared fate. What do you mean by that when you're in this respect?
Yeah, so a lot of production lines in the world have been automated, and the automation of those production lines has been done through very specialized IT-like equipment. So control systems are a different animal from, our laptops and PCs and servers that we all encounter on a daily basis, in that they frequently are doing something that physically controls a system of production process that has huge safety implications or has to be very precise in its timing. So a lot of these IT systems are very specialized in nature, and the designers of those systems, we call them the operations technology vendors, if you go back in time to when these systems were designed, it predated, even in some cases, the World Wide Web, if you can believe that. And these systems are not well protected against vulnerabilities off the network. So the shared fate problem here is if I start putting these systems on a network to collect data off of them, which is the IoT problem, now suddenly they are exposed to an attack surface, and the vulnerabilities in a lot of these older codes are extremely well known. You know, many of us are aware of the old Stuxnet, hacks took advantage of this exact fact, right? So these systems, as a result, frequently sit on completely isolated network segments, frequently for the purposes of convenience and replication. They use the exact same IP addresses in these different replicated, isolated networks that people call it air gaps when we separate them from the rest of the system. So there's really no way to access these systems from home. And in many cases, the workers in these facilities must pass in close proximity to one another. And all they're subject matter experts on operating these systems. And so the question is there should be no reason why they can't operate those systems from home. It's electrons, it's keyboards, it's monitors, right? And that's the big question. Once I network them, now I have this problem. I've taken the shared fate, and I've exposed these systems to the outside world.
Yep. I know, just thinking through some of the customers and, just the companies, the enterprises, and even government agencies that have these environments, they're not always, security, as I think you've mentioned, it wasn't always top of mind, especially when they implemented these systems. Do you think, and you did mention initially that there were a few customers that you're running into that are very, very concerned about this and are obviously looking at these, and I would imagine they're very kind of progressive enterprise type companies. But do you think in general this moving to a remote access to these industrial manufacturing plant environments is going to be kind of a tough pill to swallow? Is it going to take some time, or do you think just the nature of where we are today that it's kind of clear and a no-brainer to start thinking in this way?
Well, so I think it's a no-brainer to ask the question. And for some, the conclusion they're going to draw is it might be easier to have. We're seeing discussion and investigation into a new division of labor in the industrial environment, where I have people who know how to do things, and then I've got people who can be hands and feet. And if I separate the tasking along those lines, the hands and feet people can be separated in time and space. The problem, of course, is I've got a multitude of these computer screens that there are operator experts need to look at to diagnose any problem that emerges on the production line. And so even with this division of labor, I think there's a need to enable remote operation, especially, again, if it's keyboards and it's monitors and it's electrons. Why do I have to have people present? And I think it's only a security question and an enablement that separates us from that reality. And many enterprises are talking about this.
So how are you guys solving this? Like, what are you doing?
Well, and not yet. And in fact, this is one of the reasons that Joe and I are talking. Attila has a solution that is virtually foolproof in terms of protecting a session or conversation and obscuring it and basically completely hiding it from the environment in which the person's located. So that to me is a critical enabler of providing access to these control systems and production systems remotely. And in the past, of course, this technology now has been applied by Atilla to things like classified information and being able to access that while on the road. I've got a road warrior in a hotel room, critical project, I need to get to that. I don't even want the captive portal to show up. My laptop, the Attila technology completely hides your session in your laptop. It's multiple tunnels, and the IP address can come from anywhere you want to in the world. The same type of technology is extremely useful in this industrial setting. If I can access the human-machine interface screen, and in many cases, these are just rendered monitors and terminals, almost like we know from the days of yore. and I can expose that remotely to an operator at home who understands completion codes and error codes and understands how the equipment works, they could work from home. And this is the perfect technology to enable that. And I think it's important to realize that, part of the protection of these machines is it's not about, is my customer in battery manufacturing worried about someone figuring out how many batteries they're producing today? No, they're probably not. What they're really worried about is that that system is absolutely positively never exposed to the outside world. That's the key. It's just simply minimizing the expansion of the attack surface.
Yeah, no, perfectly said. I know that, we at Attila, we pride the fact that we have a hardware device versus a software solution, which with software requires an agent to be loaded on this equipment that, as you mentioned, is decades and decades old. So that's not necessarily something easy to do. Can you elaborate a little bit as to why you think a hardware solution there might be a better fit?
You hit on it. First of all, it's foolproof, and it's completely separate and distinct from the technologies. We've had customers running point of sale systems in their retail stores on concurrent DOS as recently as like 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh my God, my heart hurts.
Yeah, so one of the most advanced carbon fiber processes in one of my customers' factories runs on Windows XP.
Wow.
So you can't expect that you can go in and make changes to some of these systems. They're very old. They're on a 20, 30-year life cycle. They are using, however, TCP/IP in many cases, and the sessions that we know and love very much the same as other sessions on the network. It's just a question of completely separate technology that is not in any way requiring an integration task. And that's where the hardware solution, not only is it foolproof from an absolute security perspective, but it also completely separates the task of enabling remote from integration with the solution.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, this has been very, very interesting discussion. I know we're getting close to our time here, but it sounds to me that based on everything we've heard, enterprises, government agencies, companies that are manufacturing, building products should really start thinking about remote access into these critical environments, given where we are today, and unfortunately, there will be other natural disasters and things that are going to prevent people from being on premises. So I don't know if you have any final words around that in general.
Well, I think production processes as we know them were not even remotely conceived to keep people separate in time and space. They just flat out weren't. And the timescales for changing these processes are so long that a company cannot afford to rethink their production process in many cases in a timescale less than a year or two. Yeah. So the ability to do this remote operation is something that a lot of companies are going to look at. And I think it's a critical enabler in the near term and probably even in the long term.
Yeah, I would imagine like many of the other industries and places, we're seeing like this mass need to change quickly around COVID, but there's so many benefits that live far beyond the end of that it's not going away when this goes away. It's just forcing the change.
You've seen the memes on, if you're able to watch TV every now and then, you see all the Zoom memes that are showing up on every single commercial on TV now.
Yep.
And there are thoughts with many of our customers that the working remote has turned out to be a far more feasible approach to doing business for many companies I deal with than they anticipated. And a lot of people had not experimented with remote work in a big way since there were DSL lines, with 256K downlink speeds. I just got a gigabit downlink to my home. The world has changed a lot and people suddenly are realizing that, and remote work, I think, is here to stay. So if it moves into the production area, all the better.
Agreed.
Yep.
Well, Thank you so much for your time today. And to all of our watchers, make sure that you join us twice a month for 15-minute security chats to learn more about how you can secure your organization. And in this case, do make sure you sign up to come and see our IoT Integrators Summit. We're having an event where you can actually learn more about this very specific topic with this very specific speaker. So if you want more, which all of you do, I know you do, come and join us. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.